All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, down there in Atlanta, Georgia, my home area. Garrett Chapman, 247 Sports, 910 on the game. Garrett, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, sir. It's a beautiful day. New background just moved, so we're making moves, and so we're really excited about that. But life is good, man. Life is good in the beautiful Peach State.
I know, but I'm also excited to see how this evolves around you, because you're going to fill up that cabinet behind you for the good folks on youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. He's filling it up.
It's a work in progress.
It's coming. A poop emoji up there?
No.
What is that?
This is a so when I was down in Cancun, I won a little skull.
So look behind it. If you put behind the eyes and then the little thing behind it.
Oh, I see that.
Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I won a 3-point contest in Cancun a few years ago.
There you go.
But
do you see what I'm saying?
So it works pretty cool. I got all kinds of knickknacks, man. My little brother works for an airline company, or one of the big airlines, and so I'm his flight companion. So we just hop on flights and go places. So we have a lot of fun. So I have a lot of random knickknacks. I've got that's from Dublin. I know I'm looking away from the microphone, so you can't really hear me as well. But I got stuff from Dublin, Costa Rica, Belgium, Scotland, all kinds of fun places, man. Life's good.
That's clutch to have a sibling in the airline business.
Yeah, he's talked about wanting to move, and I'm like, it's okay. You don't know, you're good. Just
is this the one in Nashville or no?
Stick it in. Say again?
The
one in Atlanta. No, the one in Atlanta.
Okay.
So my old roommate.
There you go. My old roommate, the brother.
Old roommate. So weird.
There you go. Well, Garrett Chapman, on this particular program, with the offseason, the Braves won again by $1 billion last night against the White Sox, and should be another series victory for the Braves, but not a whole lot new there. And then the Hawks were kind of settling in there. My guy Euros popping threes for the Hawks Summer League team, which was great. Love seeing Plavs, who will very much not be on the Atlanta Hawks roster, but still showing out for a little bit in the group. And we'll see. We still got some time to figure things out. The DeJounte Murray extension, we'll talk about that more when Max is back. But I wanted to specifically talk about the Atlanta Falcons, because I'm just seeing a lot. We're kind of in that point in mid-July where everything's basically done. Like D-Hop's still out there, but basically everything's done. And people are starting to formulate their takes on how the different divisions are going to go. And what's common to me is I don't see a lot of people picking the Atlanta Falcons to be the best team in the NFC South, which I still feel like I'm taking crazy pills, because I think they should be considered the favorites. I think you could make, that's just where I'm at. I think the Falcons are the favorites, but I think it's fair to actually look to parse through why or why not the Falcons will be better than the Panthers, Bucs, and Saints. Who have you seen the most mocked to be the best team in the division this year? I feel like it's the Panthers.
Saints consistently. But the Saints only really because, and I know we'll get into this a little bit, but mostly because they have a quarterback who I guess on the national scale, they've seen and believe in. And take it for what you will, but Derek Carr is a pretty solid quarterback, and I'll give him credit where credit's due. He's been consistently solid. He's like a Kirk Cousins, you know. He may not wow you necessarily, but you know what you're going to get, and that's not really the same for everybody else in the division. Obviously Desmond Ridder has been subject to lots of scrutiny, especially this offseason. Just because people really don't believe in him at all. And then Bryce Young, we don't really know what he is yet. You know, he's a top overall pick. It was probably the least surprising draft pick back in April, but he hasn't taken a snap in the NFL yet. So it's hard to really quantify what he's going to be. I think he's going to be really good, obviously, and it's not really that hot of a take. He's the number 1 overall pick, but he hasn't taken a snap. And then down south in Tampa Bay, you really don't know who's going to be taking snaps. Kyle Trask was a third second round pick, I think, or something out of Florida, and he hasn't really taken any snaps at all. We saw him a little bit in the season finale against the Falcons in week 18 last year, but he looked kind of okay. I mean, it's hard to really make a judgment call based off of that sample size. And then Baker Mayfield's on like his fourth team. So no, I don't really know what to expect from Tampa Bay. I think Carolina's going to be pretty good, but New Orleans is, I've seen is overwhelmingly the favorite from at least Vegas odds and what I've seen just nationally.
Yeah. And I wonder too, with New Orleans being the most mocked favorite here, is it just because everyone expects Derek Carr to raise the floor? And you mentioned Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is better than Derek Carr, and I think
I do too. That's like a high end comparison. Kirk, by the way, gets a lot of hate, and I don't really know why. He's a very consistent quarterback. He's a 4,500 yard a year passer. Good quarterback. I don't understand why he gets all that hate.
Derek Carr played in 15 games last year, 24 TDs, 15 picks, passer rating under 85. They were 6-9. I don't really get it, because you're going to need I think a lot is going to have to go right for New Orleans to win this division. And a lot of it's in the health department. I just look at this group where Michael Thomas has not been healthy for years now. And you need a lot out of Michael Thomas when you look at this receiver room. You're going to need a healthy, non-suspended Alvin Kamara, and we'll see what he looks like every year. The running back's just how much tread does he have left on those tires? And then you obviously, the Falcons get Ryan Nielsen to run the defense. You just look at this group. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They're trending, they're just fighting reality. Chris Olave, good pick. I think he'll be a good player, but in the slot right now, is it going to be Traquan Smith? Is it Rashid Shaheed? I don't even know who that is. This is one of the sneaky, we all make jokes about the Titans wide receiver room and what they're looking at going into this year. I think you make the case the Saints have one of the worst receiver rooms in football, and I just don't think you can pencil in Michael Thomas anymore. And then Joe Woods, we'll see what he is as DC this year. And the offense got pretty stagnant last year with Pete Carmichael still running the show post Sean Payton. But I don't know. We'll see what Trevor Penning looks like at left tackle. We'll see what Ryan Ramczyk looks like at the right spot. But Jamal Williams, I guess, was a pretty sneaky, interesting signing. He was good for Detroit last year, so that's some good Kamara insurance. But I don't know. I don't look at this group and I'm like, man, this is the favorite to me in the NFC South. I just think they're very top heavy, and I don't like their depth at all. I think the only path to a 10-7, 11-5 Saints season, or 11-6 now, Saints season is some immaculate health across the board, and I don't see that. I don't think they should be in that conversation, because I just don't think that's realistic for them.
Yeah, and really, when I say Derek Carr, I specifically say that because it's the national media's perspective of it, and they look at the quarterback, and that's where they start, and that's generally where they stop. And then outside of that, it's you have a strong defense. They're good. They're going to be a top half of the NFL defense. That's where they really have their depth. And look, that's where Dennis Allen cut his teeth. But with Dennis Allen in charge of this team, I don't really have faith that the offense is going to be relevant. Derek Carr, I think you said it best. He elevates the floor, but he doesn't really take them over the top. Alvin Kamara is a 28-year-old running back who may not even play half the season.
Yeah.
The end is coming for Alvin Kamara sooner rather than later. And that's not a knock on Alvin. It's just the fact that he's, aged out. It happens in the NFL. You take hits, and he's been injured quite frequently over the past couple of years. Chris Olave is somebody who I think is going to take a huge step forward in his second year in New Orleans, especially with Derek Carr taking snaps now. So, if you're a fantasy football savant, go draft Chris Olave. But outside of that, I don't really see anything. The Saints are fine. They're going to be a good team. I think they're, like you said, they're prolonging the inevitable. And I think they're going to be a middle of the road sort of team. And that's where they differ, in my opinion, from the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons have finally established depth on defense. I think they have an identity on offense. And that's far more than you can say about the New Orleans Saints, at least on offense. I think the Falcons are going to have some versatility. Bijan Robinson's going to, people keep slapping him as a running back. He's not a running back.
Mm,
He's an offensive weapon who they're going to be able to deploy in any capacity they wish. He's
mm,
he's going to be really damn good for them. And then assuming that Kyle Pitts comes back, which I am assuming that Kyle Pitts is going to come back and be healthy, and there's not going to be a lull or a drop off of any kind coming off the knee injury. And I'm pretty confident based off of reports. You had him with Drake London, and you have two big bodied wide receivers you can effectively go up and go get the ball. And yes, I called Kyle Pitts a wide receiver because that's what he is. They're big bodied guys, and you're going to dominate the red zone. And you have Tyler. I mean, look, you got dudes, lots of dudes on offense, and you're going to overpower defenses that have increasingly gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And then and you finally have defensive depth. Like you had guys like Taquan Graham who are strong role players, strong depth players, starting football games for you last year. You had rookies across the board starting football games for you last year. You had gone are the days where you have middling players starting games. And I don't mean that as a knock. It's just the fact that you have top end talent now because you could afford it over the offseason. So the Falcons are my favorite. They're my favorite. They're not Vegas's favorite. But I think that's just only really because of the quarterback position. But honestly, I think the Falcons are going to be just fine.
Yeah, and I think too, the Falcons it's funny, the Falcons and the Saints were actually neck and neck in overall DVOA per Football Outsiders last year.
Yeah.
The Falcons were 20th in overall DVOA and the Saints were 19th. However, Saints were 22nd in offensive DVOA. If you watch that team, it was a struggle last year. And I don't think they're trending in the right direction. And I think if Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara are not healthy or not around, like you could easily see this being another bottom 10, bottom 5 potentially offense in football, and that's just not going to win the division. Like you can't do that. And the Falcons are trending up, and I think they were right there neck and neck a year ago. Falcons were the 13th best offense in football last year, and the worst defense, or the second to worst defense in football. I think I would be surprised if the Falcons are in that 30th spot once again on defense. But I also just, generally speaking, gravitate more towards the offenses I believe in than the defenses I believe in this sport. You look across the board, Cowboys are going to win a lot of games. The Eagles have one of the best offenses in football. They win a lot of games. Chiefs have one of the best offenses. The Bills. You go up and down the list. Offense, I just feel like it's more believable year over year to have a good offense year over year. I think defensive wise, like, yes, the Saints had a top 10 defense last year, but what if that falls off a little bit too? They're a year older. They're not deep. I don't know. I think the Saints actually have a pretty strong path to being the worst team in the NFC South. Like a lot of people are picking the Bucs.
Wow.
It seems like, but I'm pretty down on what the Saints are doing. And I think they should be rebuilding, and they should be just, hey, we had a great run. We came very close to the Super Bowl multiple times. But when Sean Payton left, they should have just been like, all right, we're doing a full-on tear down and start this thing over. Because, like, Michael Thomas isn't, like, you can only say it so many times. Derek Carr is not going to elevate this group and collection of assets to a contender. Like, there's no path
Dennis
to
Allen isn't
contention.
either.
Yeah.
Like, Dennis Allen's not elevating
That's
this
another
group.
good point. Like, is he the worst coach in this division? I mean, it's either him or Todd Bowles.
Todd
But, like,
Bowles, I'd still say Todd Bowles, but they're both in the running for it. They're both pretty miserable head coaches by just looking at their track records. I mean, when you lose Sean Payton, you lose a brilliant offensive mind. For as much as I don't like him very much, but he's a great offensive mind. He's a great coach. And Denver got a very good coach in Sean Payton. Dennis Allen's not that, and he's a defensive guy, and it's like he struggled consistently, and he had talent on the roster last year, and he wasn't able to elevate it effectively. So I think we'll see more of the same. I don't really know what they're doing. I think Mickey Loomis and company are just trying to. They're on life support, I think, at this point, and they're just sort of like prolonging the cycle or the whatever it is. I mean, like they're just kicking the can down the road on it, and I don't really know why.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly. I think the bottom falls out at some point, and I could see it falling out this year. This is a Falcons question. Would it matter if the Falcons had the worst, like now, like when you're forecasting where the Falcons will end up finishing in the NFC South this year? Because I was thinking about this, and it kind of speaks to what I saw with the Falcons DVOA and just what we've seen the last 2 years under Dean Pease. Like, would it matter? How much would it change your perspective if I could tell you I looked in the crystal ball and the Falcons have one of the worst defenses in football once again? How much does that change your calculus on where you think the Falcons are going to be this year?
What with Team P's moving on?
What? No, with like what they can actually be. Would they still be a division-winning favorite if they have one of the worst defenses in football? Would the offense be good enough where you can still sneak your way into 9-8, 10-7, even with one of the worst defenses, but the offense is maybe top 5, top 7, somewhere around there? Would that be enough?
If they have a top 5 offense in the NFL next year, they're making the playoffs, period. But the defense would have to be pretty miserable. But I don't really think that that's going to be the case this year. I really don't. I mean, I think I've said in one of our previous podcasts, I mean, I could see this defense getting up into, at the low end, the bottom 20. It's like 20 to 24. If they can get to that range, I think they're making the playoffs. I think they'll be a good team. If they get into the middle ground, like if they get into like the 15 to 18 range, they're absolutely making the playoffs, in my opinion. Just because I think Ryan Nielsen's a first-year defensive coordinator, and I think our full-time, like sole defensive coordinator. I think that's one of the more undersung storylines of this offseason is that you got a new defensive coordinator, and he's coming in, and they're kind of keeping some continuity with the New Orleans strain, I guess, coming over there from out west. But if he is as advertised, I think this defense is going to be pretty strong. Plus, with the influx of talent and investment that we've seen, like with Jesse Bates and guys like that, Jeff Okuda, may adding him via trade. I think the middle of the road, I think, is perfectly acceptable because I think the offense is going to control the football. And I think that's really going to help this defense a lot. And then having depth is going to matter too. You keep guys fresh, and that's just not something that this team had very much of. It was just Grady Jarrett on the defensive line and just good luck. I mean, there's a reason they had 18 sacks that last year, and then they had 20 some odd sacks over the course of 2 seasons, or 30, 40 sacks. I mean, that's unacceptable. And I think I'm not going to say that they're going to come out and get 40 sacks, 40 to 50 sacks next year, but 30 to 40, I think, is perfectly in that range. I think on the low end. But if the defense is strong, if the defense is middling, I think we'll be fine.
I just like you look at the comparisons here, and San Francisco had the best defense in football last year. Dallas at number 2, and you look at this: New England right there that kept their season alive. Buffalo top 5. Jets didn't make the playoffs; they're in the top 5. Philadelphia 6, they made the playoffs. Baltimore, did they make it? Did Baltimore end up make?
Yeah, I think so.
Baltimore made it.
They're a wild card team.
New Orleans didn't make it. Washington didn't make it. Denver didn't make it. But then you look at on offense and where they were. Kansas City, San Francisco, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Detroit, the outlier here. Cincinnati, Miami, Packers, Giants, Jags, Baltimore.
Offense wins.
Offense just, it's almost impossible not to make the playoffs if you have a top 10, top 11 offense. But you almost are guaranteed to get in with a passing offense in that frame. And I think that's probably the other part of this. If you knew the Falcons were not one of the best passing offenses in football, and you can have an efficient, strong passing offense even if you're run first. Like you saw it with even Philadelphia and San Francisco this past year. Like San Francisco is probably the best example here of what you can do in terms of being effective and being efficient, even being a defense or a run first team. Like they were the number 2 overall offense, and they were 3rd. San Francisco was 3rd in passing offense last year in the NFL. Didn't feel like it because they ran the ball and they did everything else. But I think there is a path, and I think that is going to be an under talked about point of emphasis for this Falcons team. I'm curious where they end up efficiency through the air, because I don't think they're going to struggle to run the football. What I'm wondering is if Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and enough receivers take that next step where Desmond Ridder, he doesn't have to be a top 10 quarterback in the league, but he needs to be I think he needs to be in that 15 to 17 range in the league to compound the top 10 running game. And I think then you're really cooking with something in a really good offense.
Yeah. And I think we saw flashes of what Desmond Ridder is going to be next year.
Mm.
He's not going to come out and throw for 350, 400 yards, and I think that's okay. If he gets into, like, if we're talking season totals, if he can get up to the 4,000 yard mark, I'd be very, very happy with that. I'm more looking at the interception totals. If he keeps his interceptions under 5, that's brilliant. But I'm expecting him to keep it under 10.
Yeah.
If he can throw for 25, 30 touchdowns, I think that's great. I'm expecting him to get into like the 20 to 25, 4,000-ish yards, probably a hair under that. That's my expectation. That's 225 yards per game. That's doable. And if you do that, and then you add in 150 yards, 200 yards on the ground, that's 400 yards of total offense in a game. You're winning football games if you're averaging 400 yards of total offense. And I think that's one of those things. It's something that it's a cohesive offense. And Arthur Smith talked about this right after the draft, and I think he was on a podcast or something like that. But people see teams do things one way, and they think that that's the way that the NFL does it: throwing the football, air raid, killing the game like that through the air. And they think that's the only way you can win in the NFL. A lot of different ways. And you could win. You can win through the air. You can win on the ground. We've seen done with the Tennessee Titans. We saw it last year with the Philadelphia Eagles. And those are run first teams, but they still throw the ball effectively. And I think that's an important thing. But more importantly, they're efficient when they throw the ball. And I think Desmond Ridder, we saw him get better as the season went on, at least through his 4 games. But the efficiency was always pretty much there. He wasn't making bad mistakes. He had the one interception that was called back. I guess he was the Saints player stepped out of bounds or whatever when he caught the ball. But that had been one interception. And I'd like to see a little bit more scoring. He only had the 2 touchdowns, but, that's okay. I can live with that. He's efficient. He's not making mistakes, and they're running the ball. And he kept us in football games. I mean, the Falcons last year, a lot of people forget, this team played in a number of one-score games. I think it was total was 10 or 11 one-score games, and the record was okay. But I think that is where they're going to take the biggest step forward next year. I'm saying that a lot of their losses. I think if they had 7-9. I think 7 of those losses were one-score games, something of the like. And if they take that next step where they play New Orleans week 1 last year and they don't fumble the snap, like little things like that. And I think having Desmond Ridder under center and having a strong identity on offense, those mistakes aren't going to happen. And that it's very quick how those things turn over and change. But Desmond Ridder, I think he's going to be efficient with the football. And I think that's really the catalyst for this offense.
That's fair. On the flip side, Bryce Young, we're going to have 2 vets, Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr, under center, it looks like, opening week for the NFC South teams. And then we're going to have Dez is not a rookie, but he's kind of a rookie. He got a couple games under his belt last year at the end, but still really raw, still kind of coming into that same kind of situation. Does it matter if Bryce is better than Desmond Ridder as a rookie to you?
Define better. Statistically,
he flashes more, higher upside right away, and he has a better season as a rookie.
Comparison. I'm not going to... Bryce Young was the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Yeah.
I can't... Then again, Baker Mayfield was too. But Baker Mayfield, when he was a rookie, flashed some unbelievable upside. We saw
the reason I bring it up too is I think these two are going to be compared to each other for years, the next several years here in the NFC South.
Because they'll play each other constantly. And I think they're both going to be under center for the respective teams for the next couple of years, I'd assume.
They played each other in the playoff. If you remember, Cincinnati, Alabama a year ago, they've gone head to head. I think these two are going to be locked and compared, and this is going to be the NFC quarterback battle for the next several years. Is these two,
and I think Carolina did a very good job this offseason. I'd say they had one of the more unheralded off seasons outside of Atlanta, who I think had a strong off season just in general. But what they get: DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst. Added Miles Sanders from Philly.
Miles Sanders.
These guys, and Frank
Good
Reich,
draft.
who I think Frank Reich's a strong offensive coach, is great at developing a quarterback. They had a great offseason, and they gave him weapons. They gave him consistency. on the outside. Like these aren't guys like Adam Thielen's not going to blow the top off. I think they overpaid for him personally, but you get a consistent safety valve with Adam
Jonathan
Thielen.
Mingo too. Good draft in the second round.
Oh yeah, Barkevius Mingo from Ole Miss. I mean, like look,
yeah,
or not Ole Miss. He was LSU.
No, he's Ole Miss.
Was he Ole Miss? Okay, yeah. But they've got
two different guys. Mingo was the edge guy. Jonathan Mingo is Ole Miss. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but they went out and got some safety valves for their young quarterback, and I think that is a really important thing. And I think Desmond has sort of that here in Atlanta, but they just weren't ahead of this offseason. They were already on this team. So the Panthers are going to be one of the more interesting teams, I think, because the defense is pretty damn good. Like it's going to be top half the NFL. I mean, I think it's kind of seeping into that top 10 territory. I don't know if it's there yet. I don't know where they finished last year, just off the top of my head. I think they were like 11, 12, 13 range or something like that. And you add a Bryce Young, and if Bryce Young pops immediately, the Carolina Panthers could be pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Because I think you have guys on the outside who are a little injury prone. Hayden Hurst is, he's okay. A lot of those guys haven't realized their potential fully outside of maybe a couple years of flash outside of Adam Thielen. But look, I think these guys could be pretty good. The offensive line is much better. They gave up the 11th fewest sacks last year. And the experience of Frank Reich is something that's really valuable. He's a Super Bowl winning coach, so I think the Panthers could be very good. But to compare Bryce Young, though, in year one to what Desmond Ridder is going to be, I don't know if that's fair to either guy. Bryce Young or Desmond Ridder, I'll start there. He had a full offseason. That offseason is extremely valuable. That one season, even if he's sitting on the bench, he's still learning the offense. He's still getting comfortable, learning how to be a pro, And then this offseason, he's officially the guy he's been officially the guy for the last 8 months, and I think that's very valuable to his development. Bryce Young doesn't have that. He just doesn't. And he didn't really know where he was going to go until draft day, effectively. I mean, he probably knew a little bit before that, but if we're being honest. But
I don't know. It was a good smoke screen for sure.
Right now. Sorry?
It was a good smoke screen. Like people were still like up until like, is it Bryce? Is it CJ? Or Anthony Richardson? They're intrigued by his potential, and it was like
I bet he had a playbook. Yeah. I bet he was studying that playbook back in March.
Yeah,
I bet he was. But you know what? Here we are. But Bryce Young, I think, is going to be a very good young quarterback. We'll see. He's still going to have that rookie curve that Desmond Ridder won't fully have, because Desmond Ridder's a year senior, and I think that year in the NFL matters a great deal, especially at the quarterback position.
Does it worry you at all that everyone has kind of latched onto the Bucs are going to be awful bandwagon?
Well, I mean, like we started this conversation talking about quarterbacks, and you lost the greatest one of all time. So, no, not really. The offensive line didn't get better. Tom Brady is gone. I think your weapons are aging. Your defense is pretty good, but that's not, like we talked about when you're talking about the Saints, that's not going to be enough to get you over the top.
Yeah, more depth though than the Saints.
It does have more depth. But losing Tom Brady is a tremendous loss. It really is. I think the Buccaneers they're going to surprise some teams. They're going to be bad, but at the same time, they're going to jump up and bite someone eventually. And they're one of those teams that's like you just can't sleepwalk through that game. They're going to play a lot of close football games. I just don't know if Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask is going to be enough to really keep the offense going. I don't know what their identity is on offense. I really don't. I have no idea.
Well, what's sneaky, Dave Canales is their new OC, and he was the QB coach last year in Seattle. And Geno had that career year from like just an all-time great year. And you're kind of latching on. Is Baker going to have that same kind of jump? The problem with that is like Geno's got the arm. Geno's bigger. Geno's just better than what we've seen from Baker to this point. That being said, he still installed an offense and worked with a quarterback who was left for dead in this league. Looked like he was going to be a backup for the remainder of his NFL career. Now he gets paid, and now he's just completely rejuvenated in the Northwest. Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, like this is it probably. This is his last shot of probably being a starter and proving that he can be a starter long-term in this league. So he has a lot riding on this year. Chip on his shoulder, that sort of thing. I just look, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Russell Gage is one of the better three-man wide receiver units in football still. if they play, like that's really good. Like that's still really solid by and large.
Mhm.
Tristan Wirfs still one of the best left tackles in football. That will help a lot. Run game will probably suck, but I look at the defense, like they just have dudes everywhere. Like the linebacking core still is Joe Tyron, Devin White, Levante David, and Shaq Barrett. Like that's so good. Jamel Dean's still a really good player. Carlton Davis is still a really good player. Anton Winfield still like I think the defense is still going to be somewhere
Yeah.
around the top 10. And then if you get a little bit, I see a much stronger path to the Saints being awful than the Bucs being awful. I think I'm more in the I don't think the Bucs are winning the division, but if you were to tell me the Bucs finished 7-10, 8-9, something like that, I would buy that more. I think they're going to be a game or two back of the top of the NFC South all season long.
I'm not going to agree there necessarily. I think I haven't looked at their schedule, but I know it's more difficult than that of the Falcons or anybody else in the division. I think they are more a concern for me that the bottom will just fall out. When you have a guy like Baker or Kyle, and a guy who I just don't believe in Kyle Trask, I mean, for fair or not.
Oh, their schedule is brutal, by the way.
Yeah. No, they have a much
I think
more
this is
brutal
easily the worst schedule in the NFC South.
Oh, no, it's definitely the worst comparatively.
Like they go to Minnesota right away, Chicago at home,
Bottom
Philly
falling
at
out
home, at New
very
Orleans,
possible.
Detroit at home, who was really good and they should be good. Falcons at Buffalo.
Yeah, no, dude, I'm
At
telling you,
San Francisco.
that is such a brutal start. They will not recover from that. They won't recover from that. And Baker Mayfield has to prove it early. He has to prove it early. And if he doesn't, then there are going to be question marks that start swirling. And it's not that they're going to be a bad football team per se. And that kind of goes to my point. They're going to be in a lot of those football games because that defense is good enough to keep them in football games. But I don't trust Baker Mayfield to make the right decision with the football. I just don't, because of just everything we've seen. He's going to get kind of gun happy and he's going to throw a couple game-ending interceptions, and then all of a sudden the media is going to be down his throat. And I think that's very relevant. If they get off to a hot start against that schedule, then I completely agree. They're going to be a contender in this NFC South. If they start 1-4, 1-5, 2-6, done. Nail in the coffin. Because they just don't have I don't believe in the head coach. I don't believe in the quarterback. I don't believe in the offensive line. I don't know who's running the football. They've got a great wide receiver core, like you said, but it's injury prone. Defense is good, but that's not enough to win. That's not enough to win you football games in the NFL in 2023. So
that's fair.
They could be a good team, and they will beat some teams. They'll beat some teams. Like if they go out and beat the Lions, and the Lions end up winning the NFC North, that wouldn't surprise me. I could see them causing some trouble in the NFC South, winning 5-6 games and being in most of your losses. I can see that for sure. But winning? No, I don't see that.
That's fair. Final question. The best reason why Atlanta, in your estimation, is better than everyone else in the NFC South right now. What would be your best sales pitch as to why? Okay.
Arthur Smith is, I believe, the best coach in the NFC South. That goes with Frank Reich. That goes with everybody else. I think he's the best coach. I think the team has an identity. I think the team knows what they're doing. And Terry Fontenot is also the front office has been strong. And I think this is a big prove it year. I think this is a major step forward. And I think this is the year that we truly learn what Arthur Smith is about, because we've seen him win with the Island of Misfit Toys. What does he do when he has an actual arsenal that he can deploy on Sundays? What do we see from him when now that he's actually able to do it, and he's got the weapons, go do something with it. I mean, you were top 10, top 15 in scoring. You're one of the better offenses in the NFL last year with, I don't know, a patch fit offensive line that ended up being pretty damn good. Does the offensive line get better in 2023? I think we're going to learn a lot. And I think if the season goes the way I expect it to, then Arthur Smith is going to be, he was already 26th in the coach rankings or something that I saw, like CBS did, just a travesty. And I think he's going to skyrocket up those rankings here in this next year or two. But now that he actually has an offense and a defense that competent, and they had an investment that was made, and I want to see what they can do. But overall, Arthur Smith is the reason that I have confidence in this Falcons organization moving forward.
I like that, and I think you make the case he's the best coach in the NFC South right now.
Mm-hmm.
That matters.
Frank Reich had a great season in Philly as the offensive coordinator, but as a head coach, I can't really say the same. He's been pretty good, but he's fallen short of expectations. I mean, you had strong quarterback play, or better quarterbacks, I guess, than the Falcons have had any time during the Arthur Smith tenure, and that goes back to Matt Ryan, who wasn't really a Matt Ryan. He's been an aging Matt Ryan by the time Arthur Smith got here. Arthur Smith's done more with less. So until Frank Reich shows me something else as a head coach, then I'm going to give it to Arthur Smith.
That's fair. I like it. Garrett Chapman, what can the good folks check out from you over at 247 Sports and 929 The Game this week?
Got shows all weekend, but then we're up at SEC Media Days all next week. So
in my country over here.
Yes, sir. Be up in Nashville, up in the volunteer state. So it'll be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to it. SEC Media Days is probably one of my favorite events of the year for more reasons than one. It kicks off it's really, in my opinion, the official start of football season. It gets me really juiced and excited, and love college football. So we're back in it very soon. So I'll be up staying with my brother and get to hang out with my niece a little bit too. I'm really excited about that. So it's going to be a great week. Great week.
There you go. I love it. Garrett Chapman, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.